My friend who helped me set up this account repeatedly asked me to post this story, and now says it's too good not to place here. So fine, I'll do this one more time. As others may know, I mentioned in my HOA, Homeowners Association, post about how my parents seemed to hate me and showed love only to my sister. This story sheds light on those dynamics. I was born when my mother and father were only 17 years old. My arrival prompted both my parents to abandon their high school plans and instead earn general education development certificates so that they could start working immediately. My father, in particular, was not pleased with this abrupt change in plans because he had dreams of pursuing football in college. Instead, he found himself working at a gas station. He often voiced his resentment plainly, telling me that I had ruined his dream. In the midst of this, my mother was mostly absent, not by choice, but because she too was working to support the family. They delegated the responsibility of my upbringing to a cranky but kind-hearted old lady next door. Surprisingly, she offered me more attention and kindness than my own parents. Over time, my father managed to get a better job as a manager thanks to his experience at the gas station. Shortly afterward, my mom got pregnant again, and my sister was born when I was 6 years old. Before my sister's arrival, I didn't receive much love or attention from my parents. Their preoccupation with work left them with little time for parenting. Yet, the birth of my sister marked a discernible shift, even for my 6-year-old self. It became blatantly evident that while she was cherished, I was the outsider who diminished in importance. Those who consistently manifested care and affection for me were predominantly my paternal grandparents and, to some extent, my babysitter. My grandparents embraced the role of parental figures more genuinely because they cherished me in ways a child deserves to be loved. With my sister's arrival into our family, the dynamics shifted drastically. The little attention that I occasionally received from my parents seemed to evaporate, now wholly redirected towards my sister. I was just 6, but even at that tender age, I clearly sensed the change. On birthdays and holidays, my sister would get showered with gifts and love, while I barely got a passing acknowledgement. I often wondered what was wrong with me, what made me so unworthy of their affection, and why my presence in the family seemed so negligible. Our home was a small 2-bedroom apartment. Once my sister was old enough for her room, it was deemed necessary that she had one all to herself. This decision left me with nowhere to call my own. So, without much discussion, I was relegated to the living room, sleeping on the couch. This arrangement continued for 2 long years. My surroundings consisted of little more than my clothes, some school supplies, and an old Game Boy that had, over the years, become my closest companion. It was a lonely existence, but one that I endured because I didn't know any different, and I believed this was the norm. When I turned 10, my parents decided to move to a new place. A new home normally sounds exciting for any kid, but for me, it turned out to be a move that wouldn't include me at all. Instead, my parents decided that it was best for everyone if I stayed back with my grandparents. At first, the news hit me like a cold splash of water, but as the reality sank in, I realized it was a chance for a new beginning. My life took a positive turn the moment I stepped into my grandparents' house. I felt wanted and loved. I got a room to myself again, my little safe haven. Shortly after, my grandparents surprised me with a brand new N64 gaming console, a gesture that filled me with a joy I'd never known. It was 1996 and a Game Boy Pocket soon followed that Christmas, adding to my collection. I could feel the void in my life beginning to mend, slowly but steadily. Living with my grandparents wasn't just about material gifts, though. It was about experiencing a caring, nurturing environment. They were my true home. There was love, patience, and understanding. In their neighborhood, I met kids my age, and for the first time, I had friends. We'd spend our days riding bikes, playing video games, and building forts. The creek nearby was a playground where we'd let our imaginations run wild, getting dirty as kids do. My grandparents provided me with the stability and the emotional anchor I had longed for. It was with them that I learned simple life virtues. Their home was a truly loving environment where I finally found happiness. It was remarkable how my grandparents, especially my granddad, infused my life with wisdom through everyday events. From learning to shoot pellet guns to fixing things around the house, those years of my childhood with them painted a world so vividly bright compared to my earlier years. Their approach to life taught me resilience and innovation. My granddad was a meticulous planner, influenced by his need to be prepared for anything, likely stemming from his Cold War mentality. He had wanted to volunteer for the military in the 60s, but couldn't due to medical issues. Despite his disappointment, he channeled that preparedness into life skills. We often practiced things like keeping gasoline and propane for winter outages, lessons he insisted upon. His mantra was simple yet profound. It was better to have something and not need it than need it and not have it. This ethos became my own. The value of foresight was deeply ingrained in me through both practical and emotional teachings. Under my grandparents' roof, I learned about the strength and power of resilience. I flourished, not through the indifference from my parents, but through the love and care bestowed on me by my grandparents. And for the first time, in the warmth of their home, I felt like life was finally on my side. Living with my grandparents was a transformational period in my life. Their home became a sanctuary where love was abundant and expectations were clear yet gentle. They focused on fostering my growth, rather than pointing out my flaws as my parents often did. And this enlightened me to what familial love truly meant. I settled into a rhythm that brought comfort and contentment. My daily routine revolved around school, chores, and spending time with my grandparents and my friends. It was an uncomplicated life that I embraced wholeheartedly. My grandfather was a fountain of wisdom, always imparting knowledge in the most relatable ways, and it became second nature for me to shift into his sagacious mindset. After leaving for college and then returning, life eventually set its course, compelling me to move back into my grandparents' home. This wasn't due to necessity alone. I genuinely wanted to support them, ensuring they lived their golden years in comfort and dignity. The idea of sharing a home meant contributing to it, but I also found solace in our shared history, in the memories and the future we were still to build together. My grandparents had cultivated an atmosphere that championed responsibility and love, which I naturally upheld, ingraining those values into the fabric of my being. My responsibility was not only to them, but to the lessons they taught me. So I managed the household chores, ensured the bills were paid, and made minor repairs when necessary. It was a balance of maintaining our lifestyle, respecting their legacy, and crafting a life I could call my own without losing touch with my roots. Moreover, spending my youthful days in a house they had meticulously protected and improved over the years was akin to tending a garden, and I was the garden they nurtured. It was both a home and a metaphorical teacher. With every creak of the floorboards, I felt the presence of history guiding my actions. I focused on minor renovations, small projects here and there, which not only maintained the integrity of the property, but served as a bridge, connecting my past with my present. My grandparents measured life in terms of preparedness. They converted their basement into a storage of essentials, food that could withstand time, portable propane heaters, and a collection of backup batteries and tools. Grandpa talked often about life's unpredictability, and it was through action rather than mere words that he conveyed his survivalist mentality. His incredible foresight often meant that while we had less than others, what we had was never lacking in quality or intention. Many of those evenings were spent gathered around the dinner table, where Grandpa would wax poetic about a time where neighbors would trade homegrown crops, emphasizing the virtue of self-reliance. Grandma would chime in with tales of her childhood garden and how cooperation mattered just as much as independence. They created a tapestry of stories where both prudence and passion were the threads weaving together a narrative in which I was to play an integral part. I became an avid learner in this silent school of life. With each misstep or obstacle faced, I returned to the wisdom imparted by experiences within those four walls. Knowledge that had no correlation with the textbooks at school, but taught with heart and sincerity. Family isn't always about shared bloodlines, but shared love and understanding. My grandparents demonstrated this truth daily as they patiently helped me carry the clutter of my dreams and fears through the corridors of our life together. As the years passed, my role as a caretaker naturally expanded. By living under their roof, I ensured not only continuity, but a legacy of love, mindful lessons, and respect. Helping my grandparents was a privilege, a minor repayment for their endless kindness during my formative years. These actions were my way of etching their efforts permanently into the home's foundation, ensuring that gratitude radiated from every corner. Their guidance and presence imparted in me a tenacity to face life with optimism and wisdom. I treasured this gift. Empowered by their resilience, I was confident in making decisions independently, navigating the real world with the compass of their teachings guiding my course. Building upon this foundation, life with them was not just about nurturing a home. It was about cultivating a resilient future fueled by love, memories, and the belief that no obstacle was insurmountable with the right mindset. And with each lesson learned during our shared times, my gratitude for their unwavering support and belief in me deepened. This chapter affirmed that the most valuable lessons come not from material possessions or empty achievements, but from relationships, shared experiences, and the love we show one another. And it was here, in this home brimming with love, where the essence of my strength and sense of self continued to flourish under the watchful eyes of those whom I cherished the most. One morning, as shafts of sunlight struggled to weave their way through the drawn curtains, I set about preparing breakfast. a ritual loaded with memories, mostly centered around my grandfather's undying love for his crispy bacon. A shared love for this simple breakfast item perhaps epitomized our bond, rooted in mornings spent together. Yet, on this particular morning, the enticing aroma of sizzling bacon roused no soft footsteps or pleasant greeting from him. Concern, inexplicably creeping into my heart, nudged me to ascend the stairs to his bedroom. The air seemed to hang a bit heavier, the morning extraordinarily still, as if bracing for news it yearned to deny. Upon entering his room, a realization washed over me, ice cold and heart-wrenching. My grandfather lay peacefully, utterly serene, a figure who had been a bulwark throughout my tumultuous and often lonesome journey. Desperate not to believe the sight before me, I fumbled for his faint pulse, an action driven by instinct rather than hope, but there was none. His chapter had quietly drawn to a close, eclipsed by the gentle passage of time. Despite being clutched by grief, I steeled myself to dial 911, my voice wavering but resolved as paramedics guided me through those agonizing steps. Their arrival ushered in an ominous certainty. They too confirmed a truth I reluctantly harbored. He had slipped from this world in his sleep, possibly the most peaceful manner anyone could wish for, but no consolation for a heart that felt abruptly untethered. The ensuing days rushed by in a daze, lined with sympathetic nods, hushed condolences, and logistical rituals surrounding the funeral arrangements. However, the absence of my grandparents' presence, their unwavering reassurance, echoed around me more loudly than any sympathies offered. It was a cacophony of silence that enveloped me, a stark reminder of everything they'd built and handed to me over the years, now somewhat fleeting without their warmth to anchor it. Emotionally, I was a storm barely restrained by resolve, focused on honoring his memory alongside my grandmother's. Quiet pillars of patience and love who had defined my existence. The funeral, initiated with the kind of dignity they'd embodied, quickly slid into chaos with my parents' unexpected appearance. Their presence was a paradox, to redeem their failures as parents publicly or showcase a facade of familial emotion devoid of true sentiment. Neither effort translated. They mourned not my grandfather, but rather the symbolic loss of control and expectation they had hoped to reclaim. Their grief, if one dared to call it so, was not shared for my grandparents' departure, but a poorly masked lament over the perks they deemed lost with his will's confirmation. The burial rites and the poignant gatherings that followed faded into conversations laced with suspicion and poorly disguised envy. Whispers of my unfair advantage speckled discussions. My parents' glares, once more a haunting recrudescence, rekindled memories I had believed buried beneath years of affection from genuinely invested grandparents. Soon, disdain transitioned into something more overt, animosity born by their conviction that they were deprived of a legacy they consumed since before high school faded. As the will reading began, the air grew dense with anticipation, their expressions edged with a craving for equity measured in currency alone. Yet, upon hearing the will, my parents' grasp on composure slipped, leaving frustration and eventual outrage in its stead. Disbelief swirled into anger, accusations flung carelessly yet persistently, seeking to undermine my legitimacy as their rightful heir. To them, my existence was a robbery committed against their unfulfilled desires. Ultimately, my father, with an audacity unchallenged by decency, confronted me outside that courthouse, a shadow of ruin and despair veiling whatever remained of his paternal obligation. He branded my very being the albatross that ensnared his ambitions. His venom, couched in regret, sought to unravel the strength forged in my grandparents' crucible of compassion and endurance. With a heart shielded by endurance learned in those fragile years, I stood resolute. No barbs could pierce the armor crafted by love and lessons preserved through my grandparents' devotion. I was more than the echoes of their discontent would ever concede, a truth sustaining me amid the ashes of their failed empire of entitlement. My parents ended up taking me to court to challenge the will. It was an audacious move, one I was mentally prepared for, although the sting of betrayal still lingered. As the proceedings unfolded, I withstood their glares and the hollow accusations they cast my way. Their claims were weak, driven more by emotion than legal grounding. They clung to the notion of deserving the inheritance, believing it should be their ticket out of mediocrity, but the cold truth lay in the paper trail my grandparents had wisely left behind. The judge, a stern figure but fair in his role, examined the details with meticulous care. The case of grandparents disowning their children and willing everything to a grandchild was indeed unusual, but the legitimacy was beyond question. When the ruling came, it was succinct and decisive. In my favor. Relief washed over me in waves, yet tempered by the mere spectacle of it. My parents, momentarily speechless, bore the weight of their defeat with scowls of contemplation and realization, rather than acceptance. In that courtroom, the facade they'd maintained cracked, exposing a raw, stark contempt for the life choices they'd made and the ones that had been made for them. The judge didn't mince words, expressing disapproval over their visible neglect and maltreatment. He drew upon the evidence that painted a picture of neglect inducted through whispers and conversation, courtesy of the tale substantiated by my own past and testimony. It was glaringly obvious to any observer, the disparity in love and care my grandparents had countered for the void my parents created. My father's pride took a blow he couldn't seem to recover from then and there. As we stood outside the perimeter of the courtroom sanctuary, he spoke words seething with bitterness and latent regret. He branded my existence as his greatest mistake, words which no parent should stoop to utter, yet the belief behind them was corrosive, whittling at any sliver of reconciliation that might have lingered. He lamented the loss of the life he could have led, unburdened by the weight of fatherhood, absent of the demands he never sought out. Feeling less like a son and more like collateral, I simply let my silence speak more volumes than any words ever could. I accepted, however reluctantly, that their minds were set upon their past grievances, and they would never embrace me willingly. So be it. In that juncture, a shroud lifted, revealing clarity amid the emotional carnage. I had won. I was now fully free to live the life nurtured by the love and integrity my grandparents had bestowed upon me. Later, as I distanced myself from the courthouse and the situation behind it, my parents' calls continued for some time, their persistence wearing thin as ingratitude claimed what was left of their attempts to reclaim their standing. Knowing I had protection in the form of legal acknowledgement and an unwavering will, I fortified myself in silence, resisting their advances until the clamor for attention faded into insignificance. I came to understand that merely surviving them was not my plight, but thriving beyond those roots was my legacy, one cultivated under the benevolence of my grandparents and an echo of strength that will resound beyond their shadow. As for me, entering my late 30s has brought a wave of introspection. I find myself in a unique position, one that many might envy, with no debts hanging over my head and a comfortable financial cushion from the legacy my grandparents left me. It's been years since my last relationship, a deep-seated hesitation born from those early familial fractures, yet the thought of connecting with someone new has started to flourish again. Loneliness is a natural companion at times, whispering what life could be beyond solitude. While visions of companionship dance in my future musings, even becoming a stepfather seems a more palatable prospect now. Perhaps the reflection of a heart ready to open up again. For now, I continue to honor the lessons my grandparents imparted, shaping my life not merely through survival, but with the intent to nurture kindness and strength as they did. Every decision I make, every path I walk, is imbued with their wisdom, guiding me forward to whatever horizon awaits next. At peace with my past, I'm finally poised to embrace the future.